This is Henzi, and I'm managing partner of the council services. I'm here on behalf of Unlock Blockchain, and I'm with Maha, who is the head of the regulatory affairs at the Qatar Financial Center. So welcome, Maha. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm super excited that you're here because it opens up a whole new avenue in terms of places to consider in the Middle East to have a company. So for those listeners that are not familiar with the Qatar Financial Center, like myself personally, can you just give us a bit of background or a bit of an overview?
Yes. So Qatar Financial Center is an onshore jurisdiction. We are based on English common law. We have our own company registration office and employment standard office. We allow 100% foreign ownership for entities that are established within our jurisdiction. What makes Qatar Financial Center super interesting is the fact that you are an onshore jurisdiction, meaning that you can engage with businesses within the state of Qatar itself. We also have our own court, and our tax regime is very favorable because it would only require entities to pay 10% on the locally sourced revenues.
I am so excited about this. It's okay, so I'm very familiar with the whole parallel legal system, or
Yes.
like the country within the country, because of the DIFC and AHM, right? But what excites me is to have, because when we were speaking earlier, you were telling me that you guys have a special set of licenses that you've brought out for virtual assets or tech companies, right? So can you explain a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So within Qatar's third financial sector strategy and the Fintech strategy, Qatar has decided that fintechs and digital assets and digitization is one of the key pillars that they're trying to flourish and enable in Doha.
Smart.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the back of that, we have expanded our non-regulated licenses to include certain fintech service providers. And that would include entities that are providing API, cybersecurity, blockchain activities, just to name a few. But the moment that the entities are providing fintech-related services that are touching upon regulated activities, we would then have to defer that and cooperate with Qatar Financial Center Regulatory Authority, the Central Bank, or the Financial Market Authority. So we would be able to register these firms, and they will be getting additional licenses to operate within the state of Qatar. In certain cases, we also provide incentives, like a co-working space, and we help them with expanding their network and meeting other institutions if necessary.
So if the business that was being set up as a fintech needed additional regulation from one of these other three regulators that you've mentioned, would the Qatar Financial Center actually help them to achieve that? Or would they just say, you need regulatory approval from this, and then they would have to go and kind of find out what needs to be done?
I think it depends on the use case.
Okay.
I mean, we have certain cases, for example, buy now, pay later, price comparison websites for insurance providers. Just thinking out some of them at the top of my head. These are institutions that we can incorporate within QFC, but then they would have to enroll to Qatar Central Bank's sandbox and then get the license from there. So we would try to look first, classify the business, regulated, not regulated. Not regulated, we can incorporate it. Regulated, who is your relevant regulator? And we'll try to work on a solution rather than saying an completely no.
Yeah.
But maybe if you would allow me, I can give you another case. It's around the digital assets framework. So in cooperation with Qatar Central Bank, Qatar Financial Center Authority and Regulatory Authority have rolled out their digital asset framework. And within our digital asset framework, we are going to incorporate and roll out very soon our digital asset lab, which is specifically going to look into these use cases to see which regulation applies, how are we going to take them to the finish line, and what sort of licenses would be needed.
So what you're talking about in terms of that, is that a sandbox for regulated activities, or that's just kind of like the overarching department that you guys have developed or are developing?
I mean, I would think of it more of a sandbox.
Okay.
We have identified some use cases, but it's not exclusive to them. Some of the use cases that we have identified are real estate, carbon credits, and Islamic sukuk. But our focus around digital assets is primarily around the tokenization aspect of real-world assets.
That's what I was just going to dive into. I was going to dive into that, and I was going to dive into the sukuk, because these are like they're hot topics now, and in the virtual asset space we go through trends, right? So the hottest trends now, or the hottest trends that it has been for a while, is real world asset tokenization. So let's go more into that, and then we'll go into the Islamic finance side of things.
Sure.
So you were just telling me that you guys have a means whereby companies can apply for a license to tokenize real world assets. Yes. Can you explain that in more detail, please?
Yes, so within our digital asset lab that is done in cooperation with Qatar Central Bank, real-world asset tokenization and entities who are interested in participating in that can register and express interest in our digital asset lab. They would have to fill an assessment form, explain what they're doing, and then we will be looking into these applications and determining if they're really trying to provide a service or a product that is interesting for the Qatari market. And then we will be looking into them in a course of few months, letting them explore the ecosystem, take them into different use cases. And at the end of that, we would determine, again, is it a regulated activity, not regulated activity? What type of license would it require? And there is some consideration around conditional licensing. But this is something that we're still working on with our regulators. Because we need to learn from the industry. The industry also needs to make sure that it's addressing compliance considerations, AML, and consumer protection in a proper way. And the best way is having this controlled sandbox environment until we roll it out to the public.
Of course. So what you're saying is real world asset tokenization is considered a regulated activity, right? That needs to go within the...
If you're targeting, for example, customers, if it has to do with financial services, then yes, it's regulated. But the application of, for example, you have a token service provider, a validator. We're looking into which roles would be really regulated and which not. Because I feel like the majority of the regulations that we're seeing would very much be focused on the financial services aspect. And seeing if they will be covered under securities or banking law. Perfect. But we do not want to also do certain use cases and service providers injustice by putting them under the regulated financial sector section when they're purely infrastructure providers, for example. That should not be regulated. Maybe they could be falling under an outsourcing agreement or having some digital operation resilience aspect that they have to comply with, but not necessarily regulated in a financial sense.
That's good. So what I'm hearing is that you guys will be very flexible on a case-by-case basis.
Absolutely.
Which is exactly how we would love things to be, right? So then the actual license activity, would it just be real-world asset tokenization?
Yes. So within the digital asset framework, there are a number of service providers, token service providers, validators, custody service providers, etc. And these are things that we would be also looking into, but the Digital Asset Lab would focus primarily on the use cases that we mentioned previously, and maybe we could look into expanding it to others.
Oh, good. And then do you guys differentiate between, I have so many questions for you, because I want to see if it's a good use case for some of the clients that we get here. So when you guys, do you guys differentiate between real world assets and real estate, or is real estate considered, do you loop it in under your definition of real world assets?
We would loop it in.
Okay. Because here it's kind of separated. Like real world assets is permitted, but then when we get to the real estate side of things, it's a little bit more complicated. Okay, so you guys just have it as part of, that's very good. So it is possible then to tokenize.
Yes, I think for us the distinction comes because we currently have a crypto ban, or we would see cryptocurrencies as exempt tokens that are not allowed to be operated. So basically everything else would be seen as either an investment token or real world asset that will be tokenized and therefore allowed.
Fantastic. And so the next thing is obviously the Islamic finance side of things. We're seeing a lot of interest in that space. So again, we spoke about the real world assets. Can you just go into more detail about what your regulatory framework would look like for the Islamic finance side of things in terms of virtual assets? Yes,
I think what would make the framework that we have extremely unique is that we have seen a lot of use cases around dematerialization of securities, bonds, units of funds for traditional assets, conventional assets. But within the same logic, we can apply that for Islamic finance and for the issuance of Islamic bonds or sukuk. And by that also we can increase the market share and hopefully the liquidity in the secondary market, which is one of the issues that we're trying to solve.
That's fantastic. So I love this because usually with the regulators they have, because you were saying that that your financial center is governed by English law, right? But the fact that you guys are permitting Islamic finance principles or items, so to speak, within the digital asset framework is fantastic. Because obviously, like those white papers or the documents for that will have to be in line with Islamic finance principles.
Yes.
But you guys are then accommodating that. It's very good accommodating that under the English law umbrella. So
yeah,
that's absolutely fantastic.
There was a circular from Qatar Central Bank, if I'm not mistaken, it was in 2018, 2019, where Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies trading was seen as prohibited. The reason behind that was primarily to ensure consumer protection, because back then it was not regulated. And some people were of the opinion that it was because of its speculative nature. So we still have that crypto ban. So basically, an individual might choose to trade crypto, but they would be doing it either through their own personal wallets, like hosted, unhosted wallets, even though I don't really like the term unhosted wallets, personal wallets, or through some of the decentralized exchanges. But the moment that the individual would like to convert his crypto to fiat to a Qatari banking system, it will not work.
Really?
Yes.
I just have another question for myself. If one were to set up in the like one of these tech licenses that you guys are making available, right, for fintechs, or how long does it generally take? Not going down the regular route. Assume it's just like a straightforward API.
I'll give you an example. So within the Web Summit in Doha, which happened just very recently, we managed to license 100 firms in 3 days.
Wow! Wow!
So basically, it's the usual disclaimer, provided they have the documents in place and the business case in place. It's pretty straightforward. Realistically, it could take maybe up to a week, and that would include getting your company registered, getting the employees' visas and residencies, bank accounts, etc. But it really depends on the completion of the application that is provided. But we had a very good success story with the Web Summit where we managed to register 100 companies in 3 days.
Wow. Well, I think we'll be registering quite a few there, because it's great to have that kind of support and that kind of flexibility. But then also, obviously, being the financial center of Qatar, it's a governmental establishment. So, no, that's great. Thank you, Maha. It was very nice to speak to you.
Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate it a lot.